We are now at 32 minutes after the hour. I think we can get started. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. My name is Namkolo Kovic. I work at the International Livestock Research Institute. I am the Regional Director for East and Southern Africa for the CGIR and the Director General's representative to Ethiopia for the International Livestock Research Institute. Welcome to this webinar. And our webinar today is on investing in African opportunity crops through the Vision for Adapted Crops and Soils initiative. This initiative, which we are increasingly now calling a movement, actually started in 2023, last year. So we've moved quite quickly. And so you will hear about work that has been done to try and make these opportunity crops, which are usually traditionally neglected crops, that can actually contribute to better nutrition outcomes on the African continent and elsewhere, but starting first with the African continent. But crops also that can help with climate adaptation and having greater resilience for food security. So we are about to start with a launch of reports, which is why we are having this webinar today. So to start us off, I would like to invite, I think, our first speaker, who is going to be Cynthia Rosenweig, Senior Research Specialist at NASA, Goddard Institute for Space Studies, co-founder of AGMIP. She's co-leader of Climate Impacts Group, Center for Climate Systems Research, and the winner of the 2022 World Food Prize. Cynthia, can I turn over to you?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Namu, for that introduction. And welcome to all participants in the VAX Report Launch webinar. I'm giving a special welcome from AGMIP and from the Columbia Climate School, who have worked to organize this webinar event. The two reports are a research in action, that's the high-level summary of the VAX research. The second report is the technical side on the VAX opportunity crop profiles. We want to give special thanks to the Rockefeller Foundation for supporting the research that is going to be presented today. We also want to thank the many researchers and practitioners who collaborated to make these reports possible, from the African Orphan Crops Consortium, Havos AI, FAO, C4ICRAF, the State Department, African Union, and others. We want to give special thanks to longtime AGMIP collaborator, Professor Stillis McCarthy, who will be presenting the results of the AGMIP work, and her fantastic team at the University of Ghana, as well as the excellent team of scientists from our institutes at NASA GISS and the Columbia Center for Climate Systems Research. Why is VAX important? VAX important because it focuses on two necessities for future food security: climate resilience and excellent nutrition, delivery of nutrition in the food system. While many have hypothesized that indigenous and traditional crops could support more climate resilience and nutritious agricultural ecosystems, few models of this, few scientific work on process-based models has been developed to date. To test these hypotheses, AGMIP as part of the initiation of the VAX movement, has developed 20 new process-based models for what we now call opportunity crops, selected through a consultative and iterative process with a wide variety of stakeholders to assess how the productivity of these crops may fare under a range of climate change scenarios. These models are not just for cereals, but are for crops across the food basket: cereals, tubers, fruits, grains, vegetables, and legumes. While this work is still very much in the early stages, it's an important step forward for understanding the climate resilience potential of these opportunity crops. Going forward, we look forward to continuing to build the evidence base supporting VAX, orienting the decision-making on the ground. But we also need to work in countries to implement the climate resilience and nutrition strategies that the VAX crops represent. Collaborations with plant breeders, climate crop modelers, these need to continue and grow. Nutrition experts, economists, policymakers. Of course, engagement with local farmers and consumers for stakeholder-driven research. Strategic support for national and regional climate adaptation planning. And finally, something that we're also very interested in is developing and continuing to develop the framework to measure VAX progress via adaptation indicators. With that, I turn over back to Namu and look forward to hearing all the presentations of this launch event.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. Indeed, we need to look at future food security and nutrition combined, which really gives me much pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who is a nutrition champion of note, in Lynette Newfield, the director of the Food and Nutrition Division at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Lynette, over to you for your remarks.
Thanks very much, Nwaokolo, and thanks very much for the opportunity to say a few words on behalf of FAO. We're really pleased to be here, be part of VAX, and really welcome the many people on the call today. So as laid out in the FAO's Strategic Framework 2022-2031, FAO is strongly committed to the achievement of better production, better nutrition, better environment, and a better life, leaving no one behind. Realizing that vision and that ambition now and in the future requires a portfolio of actions that simultaneously address hunger, food insecurity and malnutrition, while transforming agri-food systems to be sustainable, to do their part to stay within the 1.5-degree planetary boundaries, while protecting and enhancing livelihoods. We highlighted VAX as a model to contribute to this ambition in the global roadmap for achievement of SDG 2 and the 1.5-degree limit that was launched by FAO at COP28. We know from experience that more production of food, even nutritious food, does not necessarily translate into its consumption in the quantities and forms that enhance the quality of diet and ultimately contribute to better nutrition. Just as the development of enhanced seeds and agricultural inputs do not necessarily translate into their uptake by farmers. Realizing the potential of VAX, therefore, necessitates working in a very integrated manner, building bridges among disciplines such as soil science, plant breeding, rural extension, value chain development and investment, consumer education and demand creation, among many, many other areas. Of course, we all ultimately work within our individual sectors, but realizing the ambition of VAX requires that we do that in consort towards the common goals of healthy cropping systems and healthy diets for all, now and in the future. As was already noted by Cynthia, we don't have good examples of that being done at scale. Perhaps there are some small niche projects that have been done in individual contexts that provide some basis for some of the work. and some ideas and some examples of good collaboration. But meaningful results cannot be achieved without action at scale. And this requires a strong and purposeful enabling policy environment, again, across the multiple disciplines and sectors that are implicated within VAC's very ambitious theory of change. Effective implementation support is also a critical part of success for actions at scale. FAO works on policies and actions across these various domains. And although I'm speaking to you today from the Division of Food and Nutrition, all of the implicated divisions are very happy to be a part of the efforts of VACS, and we are strongly committed to working with you all to realize this ambition. And we look forward, very much forward to doing so. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Lynette. And indeed, we need all hands on decks from production all the way to consumption on these opportunity crops. Before we move on to the next speaker, I just want to indicate to participants that there is a Q&A function. You can add comments or questions in there. We will answer as many of them as possible later on if we have enough time. Otherwise, we will find other ways in which we can actually address these questions. Now, next, our next speaker is Her Excellency Laura Aguilera, Minister Minister Plenipotentiary and Deputy Director General for Development Cooperation in the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. Your Excellency, over to you for your remarks.
Thank you so much, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I would like to thank you for this invitation. This is, in fact, a topic very important. I would also like to convey the regards of Director General for Development Cooperation here at the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Stefano Gatti, who is currently traveling in Africa and could not attend. First of all, I would like to underline that food security is one of the main priorities of the development agenda of the Italian G7 presidency. And I think that in this panel, I didn't see him already, but there should also be the special envoy Mayaki, who is a friend of the Italian G7 presidency, is in fact an active participant to the G7 Food Security Working Group, along with G7 countries, FAO, and the World Bank. The main outcome of our presidency in this field will be the Apulia Food Security Initiative, to be adopted by the leaders during their meeting in June, which in fact will take place in Apulia. In the Apulia Food Security Initiative, we will highlight several initiatives focusing especially on the nexus food security, climate change, stemming from the wide endorsement of the COP28 Leaders' Declaration on Sustainable Agriculture, Resilient Food Systems, and Climate Action. And in line with the centrality of the climate food systems transformation nexus, the G7 Apulia Food Security Initiative will also highlight the vision for adapted soils and crops. Moreover, in October, at the Development Ministerial Meeting, we will analyze in a more detailed way the initiatives presented in the Apulia Food Security Initiative. The intention of Italy as G7 presidency is to promote VACS in this context by two ways, politically and financially. On the political side, we will put at disposal the Italian position as G7 presidency to put forward a strong political endorsement in which all G7 members recognize the importance of VACS, promote this initiative, and ask other countries to sustain it. Following this political commitment, we will promote the already existing financing windows, FAO, IFAD, CGIAR, and also the adherence to VAX through aligned bilateral commitments. In fact, we are also discussing internally about how Italy could support VAX through concrete projects. In this context, in which we are focusing the G7 presidency on food security issues, especially on the nexus of food climate, we look with apprehension at the coffee value chain, which is suffering terrible consequences from climate change. And we are considering investing in this traditional crop in sub-Saharan Africa. Currently, a high-level technical delegation of the Italian Development Cooperation is on a trip to several African countries, evaluating the possibility to start a project in this field. To conclude, as I explained, Italy will promote VAX in the G7 framework in order to contribute to make this initiative global, with more donors and more investments to contrast food insecurity and climate change in Africa. I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and thank you too for the advocacy that you have already started for the VAX movement. Our next speaker is really a visionary for the VAX initiative, and this is His Excellency Special Envoy for Global Food Security at the U.S. State Department, Dr. Kari Fowler. Over to you to offer us your visionary remarks.
Thank you, Namankolo. As you might hear, there's a little bit of construction work going on here, so I hope it's not too distracting. The Vision for Adapted Crops and Soils, or VAX, was launched about a year ago with FAO and with the African Union, in the belief that sustainable food security requires fertile soils and adapted crops that are adapted to the environment, crops that are adapted to climate change, crops that are adapted and improved for smallholder farmers and, of course, for the market. These are crops that provide macro and micronutrients that are absolutely essential to nutrition security. Nutrition is at the heart of the VAX movement. VAX focuses on traditional and indigenous crops. These are nutrient-rich crops that historically have been tended by women. Our goal in the beginning was not to create a project, but actually to create a movement. And all of you joining on the call today are part of that movement. We've had a lot of help. The Rockefeller Foundation in the beginning supported the process for identifying the crops that had the most promise for providing nutrition and for being adapted to climate change. The African Orphan Crops Consortium, which has long been a leader in this space, provided their analysis and information and guidance along the way. So did FAO, particularly through the nutrition and the economic analysis that they provided. AgMIP, as you know, did yeoman's work in the climate modeling space, and really visionary work. And we had the help of Havos AI, who contributed artificial intelligence help identifying information about these crops. And virtually from the beginning, we had one CGIAR, we had IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, and we had FAO collaborating with us. Along the way, a number of countries pitched in and have started to provide financial support for this kind of work. And that includes Japan, the Netherlands, Norway, the UK. In the United States, the work that we're going to do is being done through the Feed the Future program of USAID. And we've already made substantial investments in soil mapping and modeling and analytics, and in ramping up production of seed for some of the improved varieties of some of these opportunity crops that were already in the pipelines. And then you just heard from Italy, the announcement about their intentions, really important, essential to our movement of what they're going to be doing in the G7 process. We truly appreciate that. We've also had interest and support from the private sector, financial contributions from Cargill and ADM, and in-kind contributions from Bayer and others. And then finally, civil society has been participating. I'll just mention a few. There are many: Catholic Relief Services, One Acre Fund, Concerned Worldwide, and they've all joined in something called the Vax Champions Program. If you want to learn more about that, contact us at the State Department or any of the other presenters today. Last week, we held the first Community of Practice event, which had more than 180 people participating in it. So we hope to bring people together for synergistic purposes so we can multiply the kind of effect that we've had. So this is the beginning of a movement. I want to thank everybody for what they've done so far, and I want to invite you to participate in the future. Thanks a lot. Nomenkola, back to you.
Thank you very much, Special Envoy Fowler, and thank you too for all the hard work you have done so far for the initiative. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Ibrahim Mayaki, who is the African Union Special Envoy for Food Systems, and also former Minister of Niger, as well as former CEO of the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD. Dr. Mayaki, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here and to be part of this movement, as you were saying, which in my view is extremely important and very opportune. So as we come together to confront the pressing issues of food insecurity in Africa, we must recognize the complex array of challenges facing our continent. And these include socio-political, economic, environmental, and technological factors. The transition of many African countries from net food exporters in the 60s to net importers since the 80s underscores the urgency of our situation. Our journey toward food security remains incomplete without addressing the critical issues of soil degradation and restoration. Soil degradation poses a serious threat to our food security, biodiversity, and climate resilience. And according to a recent report from FAO and NEPAD, up to 65% of productive land is degraded, with desertification affecting 45% of Africa's land area. This results in an annual loss of 3 points of GDP and increased vulnerability to hunger and poverty. And to address the food insecurity crisis in our continent, there is an urgent need to take immediate and significant action to combat land degradation. And this requires the implementation of effective policies and practices that support sustainable land management, conservation agriculture, and integrated soil fertility management. And empowering local communities, farmers, and land users to actively participate in this process is also very critical. And it can be achieved through the provision of training and education on sustainable land management practices, as well as by creating opportunities for farmers and land users to engage in decision-making processes related to land use. Leveraging regional and global initiatives can also be instrumental in achieving the goal of restoring degraded lands. For instance, the Great Green Wall Initiative seeks to combat desertification and land degradation in the Sahel region of Africa by planting a wall of trees stretching across the continent. Similarly, the AFR 100 initiative aims to promote sustainable land management practices by providing local farmers with access to appropriate technologies and information. Seed quality is another critical aspect of food security in Africa. While genetically engineered crops hold promise, responsible harnessing is essential. Collaborative efforts like the African Orphan Crops Consortium plays a crucial role in integrating traditional African food crops into our agricultural systems. The AOCC's mission to enhance the genomes of 101 traditional African food crops is a monumental step forward towards food security, nutrition, and income generation. Moreover, addressing seed quality is crucial to improve agricultural productivity and yields. Poor quality seeds can lead to low germination rates and reduce crop seeds that can withstand climate change is also essential. Climate change exacerbates such as soil degradation and seed quality, posing an additional threat to agriculture in Africa. So investing in climate-adapted crops and resilient farming practices is therefore crucial for long-term sustainability. To address all these challenges, the launch of a Vision for Adapted Crops and Soils VAX program in collaboration with Dr. Kari Fowler, the US Global Envoy on the Food Systems, is a significant step towards addressing the numerous challenges facing food security in Africa. VAX aims to develop climate-adapted crops and innovative soil fertility management practices tailored to Africa's needs. Through its partnership with the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa, FARA, VAX utilizes a decision framework to implement the Soil Initiative for Africa, guiding farmers on crop rotations to improve soil health while cultivating diverse and nutritious crops. Furthermore, VAX aligns with various initiatives such as the African Union Green Recovery Action Plan, the GRAP, and the African Union Climate Change and Resilient Development Strategy and Action Plan, focusing on climate resilient agriculture and sustainable soil management. Lastly, VAX supports the African Union's request under the US-AU Food Security Framework by promoting soil health, climate-smart research, and traditional crop cultivation, contributing to diversified and resilient food systems. The African Union plays a vital role in convening stakeholders for the implementation of the AU Common Position on Food Systems, which the VAX program is fully aligned with. And the post-Malabo CAADP agenda, on which we are currently working, is being developed. And as it is being developed, it provides an additional opportunity for the integration of VAX to the post-Malabo strategy, with support from development finance organizations such as the World Bank and African Development Bank. So in moving forward, firstly, it is essential to prioritize investments in soil health to ensure long-term agricultural productivity and sustainability. Secondly, in addition to soil health, enhancing seed quality and diversity is crucial for improving agricultural productivity and resilience across the continent. This involves establishing robust seed testing and certification systems, supporting seed multiplication programs, and promoting the use of climate-resilient seed varieties. Lastly, the adoption of climate-smart agricultural practices is also paramount for building resilience in Africa's agricultural systems. This holistic approach integrates climate adaptation and mitigation principles, focusing on practices such as crop diversification, water-efficient irrigation, and conservation agriculture. So the triptych we have in prioritizing restoration of degraded lands, seed quality, and climate resilience is essential. By tackling these challenges and implementing sustainable land management practices, we can build a more sustainable and resilient food system for our continent. This will require the collaboration and commitment of all stakeholders, and I see all of them here, and many more are encouraged to come, including governments, farmers, and local communities. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Special Envoy Mayaki. You have indeed very clearly indicated how the VAX movement fits into the broader Africa continental vision and goals as well. Really, we move on to the next bit of our webinar, and this is now to look at an overview for VAX Research in Action report in terms of opportunity profiles and the reports that we are launching this morning. Building on what Special Envoy Mayaki has indicated, looking at the VAX initiative now increasingly being called a movement, it started, as Special Envoy Fowler indicated earlier on, it started in 2023 in February with discussions across the African Union, the FAO, and the US State Department. And it has moved very rapidly, you know, really building a lot of momentum in a very short period of time. What we have done so far is that there has been literature reviews that were done, building on the 101 crops that Special Envoy Mayaki mentioned from the Africa Orphan Crops Consortium, actually looking to identify those crops on the African continent that provided potential to help with addressing both nutrition and soil health. These were complemented with literature reviews and nutrition composition data analyses by FAO to actually look at the nutritional quality of these crops. Work also through AgMep looked at how these crops fared across different climatic and environmental challenges, and also then looked at suitability across the different regions of the African continents. These efforts were complemented through two special workshops that were held, one hosted by FAO in May 2023, and the second that at the end of the year hosted by the Rockefeller Foundation in New York in November 2023. This has led us to two products. One being the Vision for Adapted Crops and Soils Summary Report, which you will hear about shortly. And then the other is a list of opportunity crop profiles that we can look at and begin to use as a resource. Since we are calling this a movement, the idea is multiple stakeholders can engage with this vision and begin to look at what they are doing. So these reports will offer a starting point for multiple stakeholders to see how they might engage with this vision for adapted crops and soils. And so this brings me to our next point on our agenda, and this is the presentation of the summary report. On your program, it shows that Dr. Dulles from the University of Ghana was going to present, but it sounds like they are having challenges with connectivity in Ghana. And so Dr. Cynthia is going to present on her behalf. Dr. Cynthia Rosenweg, over to you, please.
Thank you, Namu, and we're really sorry that Professor McCarthy couldn't join us because very much she is the leader of the work that that I will present. But it was very much a joint effort with her leadership, her team in Ghana, and team at Oregon State, NASA, Columbia University, all coordinated by AGNIP. Kevin is advancing the slides. Thanks, Kevin. Let's go to the next one. So as I mentioned in my brief welcome remarks, the food basket approach was taken to select opportunity crops to be modeled. This is really a breakthrough because there have been lots of work on the big four crops, maize, wheat, rice, and soybeans, but much fewer work in regards to developing models, and not only for cereals, but legumes, roots and tubers, vegetables, oils, and seeds. And here you have the panoply of the crops, of the opportunity crops, which were selected for this first round of modeling. There's much more work to be done with the many other opportunity crops, but this is what we selected first to work on first in this collaborative process of selection and iterative to select these crops for the first initial work. Next, please. So why did we work on modeling the climate and crop interactions for VAX? And we do so because the process-based crop models are capable of simulating climate change impacts on crop productivity, and they enable the testing of adaptation strategies to changing climate conditions. They are capable of, they have components that reflect the genetic components, the genetics, the environment, including the soils and the climate, and management. What are farmers doing in their fields? All of these aspects come together for climate resilience. We're working also, we had great working with the FAO nutrition experts, as well as nutrition experts from the Columbia Climate School. We are working on embedding the nutrients in the crop models right now. Next, please. So here's some examples of the models of cowpea and taro with climate change scenarios. What was the climate change impact in the 2050s? So we did both on the left, a low greenhouse gas emissions scenario, and on the right is a higher greenhouse gas emissions. The lower emissions has lower climate effects, the higher have higher climate effects. We look at the relative yield change, which is the percentage of increase or decrease compared to the model baseline yields. This is after calibration and validation of the crop models. What we find is that what we found in this initial research and simulation work for climate change is that gridded crop models, so area of yield declines, we can see where those are with the yellows and oranges. And we also see potential for gains for opportunity crops under both the low and the high emissions scenarios. And these tools, this modeling tool, helps to see geographically where these areas of gains and losses are. Next, please. Then with the crop models, we were also able to compare across a range of crops, comparing to a baseline. In this case, maize, testing fonio, teff, finger millet, pear millet, and sorghum. And then for each grid box, for each area that we simulate across the African continent, we then look to see which had the largest decrease in relative yield for the high emission scenario. This is a lot of climate change in the 2050s. And which had the largest decrease on the left, which had the largest increase on the right. So on the left, we see that maize is the most vulnerable to climate change across the continent. That's the blue that we see almost ubiquitously, it had the largest decrease. On the right, we see that opportunity crops were the most resilient to climate change. Sorghum, pearl millet, and finger millet are the most resilient to climate change across most locations on the continent. And I turned to Dr. Fowler just to call out that when he saw this map right before he has to leave to go to a meeting at the State Department, that this is the one figure that Dr. Fowler took to present to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change Conference of the Parties last November and December. Let's go on. This is showing how we can learn about the climate resilience of the opportunity crops from the modeling. Next slide, please, Kevin. But it's, of course, not just only, as speakers have said, and Lynette said, it really brought forward in her remarks, that, of course, yield is very, very important, and as we see on the right. But on the left, we see the adaptation indicators that we then developed with the full VAX research team in the initial research phase. So this brought together the breeding in yellow, the breeding aspects of what are the number of accessions of these crops, what's the scale of the programs, and Special Envoy Miyake also spoke about the number of accessions, the seed supply, things like that, very important. That's in the yellow. The nutrition is in the dark blue, and we go to we have one, FAO provided fantastic nutrient composition data for the opportunity crops that we could then all work together on these adaptation indicators. And then in the turquoise, we see the crop modeling results from projected yield change. We also have indications of heat tolerance and drought tolerance as well from the crop models. And these are all compared to a baseline crop. In this case, I believe it's maize. And these are the adaptation indicators combined, so we can look at them across those three areas: genetics, nutrition, and climate change resilience. And these results are for TEF. Let's go to the next slide, please. And this is showing what's in the report. This is from the crop profiles report, the second of the two reports, and it's showing describing each one of the opportunity crops, linkage to key, for example, a quote from an expert plant breeder, and then the key features of TEF expressed here in the colors and the circles on the right. Next, please. We also had very lively discussions about food trees and the crop portfolio approach. Very, very important. And here we are going to be developing for the tree crops a customized crop portfolios. This is work going forward with C4 ICRAF. Customized crop portfolios to really promote diversification, to provide micronutrients in staple-based systems. They can fill the food harvest gaps and provide micronutrients that are significant in the dietary diversification. So the nutrition part is very, very a very integral part to the VAX research. Next, please. So we want to give a big shout out to the AgMIP-VAX team. As I said, Dilys McCarthy just led a fantastic team in the University of Ghana. And you can see here, and this shows the integrated approach that speakers have been calling for, that this is what's needed to actually fulfill the VAX vision and to have the movement really be effective. Climate crop modeling, nutrition, economics, gender, of course, and of course, communication and making it all coordinate and work together. So I think with that, I think we've just want to say to learn more about AgMIP, please go to the AgMIP website, www.agmip.org. And join the AgMIP listserv. We're a network of agricultural modelers and food system modelers all across the world, now over 2,000 of us in AgMIP, and we invite everyone to join who's participating in this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cynthia, and thank you extra also for being prepared to step in at 30 seconds notice. We move on to Cameron Cruz, who's going to give us an overview of the VAX Explorer, which is a tool that has been developed to help navigating the data that has been generated thus far. Over to you, Cruz.
Thanks, Namakolo. Yeah, I'm Cameron Cruz. I work for Earth Genome. We build machine learning tools and applications that highlight issues and topics that are important to the environment. As Dr. Rosenberg just said, VAX is a really a diverse project, and it's a diverse initiative. And the data and the reports we believe should be accessible by diverse communities. And so what we did is we partnered with AgMIP and the State Department to take the reports that are being shared today and develop them into an interactive application. So over the next few minutes, I'm going to walk through this application that we built. But while I do that, I'm actually going to share a link to it that other people can access as well. So this is publicly available. And our intention for this is that this makes the data and the takeaways from VAX more accessible. So we want you to share this with your community, particularly people that might not be experts in this field. I know most people on this call probably are well-versed in these topics, but we built this application to allow the data to be accessible and explored by all. So I'll walk through some of the highlights of the app really quick, and then share some of the things that I found most exciting through this, then hand it back to Namakolo. While I do that, I'll share my screen here. So the front page of this website here shows just the overview of the VAX program. And what you can do is you can dive into the findings, both from a crop comparison perspective, as well as a detailed crop exploration perspective. When you look through a crop comparison perspective, you'll see these charts here and these maps that actually look very similar to what we just saw. Those reports and the maps on the slides replicate this data, but you can see it across all these different crops here, or even filter for different types of crops. As Dr. Rosenberg just said, you can look at crop futures in a high emissions or low emissions scenario. And what we see in the yellow here is where crops are predicted to be vulnerable to climate change in 2050 in this particular scenario. In the green is where we're seeing maybe some potential or resilience for these particular crops. But as you scroll through, you can see that not all crops are equal, and certain crop profiles have certain different vulnerabilities in different areas. If you find one of these interesting, you can actually click into it here. But before you do that, you can actually go through the different nutrients as well, because crops are more than just plants. They're food for us, and they're important because you can explore the different nutrients they provide for different communities. And this will actually sort by those different nutrients. So let's go into one like cowpea. And this is getting into a more detailed view of how a user can explore the different crop in detail in different areas. So the first thing I want to point out here is this, again, it looks very similar to the chart we just saw, highlighting a crop profile compared to its benchmark. So cowpea is a legume here. And so the benchmark legume we can see is one of these here, which would probably be soybean. So how does cowpea stack up to soybean in its protein content or perhaps its calcium content? You can go through each of those rankings in this radar chart here. But we can also see in general, how does cowpea do across the continent? And you can see that here in the barcode chart, or even just in this interactive map. And you can go into different countries or different points of interest and see the predicted models, resilience or vulnerability at a particular place. And again, you can switch between a low and high emissions future modeled scenario. One of the more interesting charts, I agree, it sounds like Dr. Fowler shared this one at his event as well, is how do these crops look compared to others? So which crops are going to be the most resilient versus which are going to be the most vulnerable? And this is, again, replicating the map that was shared earlier. And you can see in each location where the research is showing certain crops to be most resilient, in this case, an increase in yield. And you can go through these different areas and see which crops will be the most resilient. Or if you want to look at the different perspective, where do we predict crops to be most vulnerable across the continent? And of course, this is just sharing legumes, but if we switch to a different crop, for instance, pearl millet, you can see the cereals that are going to be most vulnerable across the continent or the most resilient. So again, going back to the purpose of this application, we want you to share this with your communities. And real quick, before I hand over the mic here, what would VAX be without the soils? We also created a map that exposes some of the very high level soil content across the continent. You can really zoom in here and start to see some of these findings make sense when you look a little bit deeper into the roots of everything. Here you can see sand content or soil carbon content. So feel free to share this with your communities. We'd love to hear any feedback. If you think this application is missing something, feel free to reach out. It's been a pleasure working with y'all, and thanks for having me today. Namakolu, back to you.
Thank you very much, Cameron. And indeed, there's a lot of information that has already been generated in just over a year. And so I think we move on now to a video recording presentation from Jaron Porciello, who was not able to be with us today. And this will address an overview of the evidence synthesis that we have heard about. Over to IT team for the video.
Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. It's a pleasure to be with you for the launch for the Vision for the Adapted Crops and Soils. My name is Jaron Porciello. I'm an associate professor at the University of Notre Dame and also the Chief Technology Officer and co-founder at Havos AI. Havos AI was one of the two technical partners backstopping the Vision for Adapted Crops and Soils, along with partner AgMIF. I'd love to thank the Rockefeller Foundation, the State Department, FAO, the African Crops Consortium, and the African Union for forming such a strong partnership to launch today the findings for the Vision for Adapted Crops and Soils. I'm so sorry that I can't be with you in real and present time today for the launch, but I'm actually in transit from Kigali, Rwanda, which feels appropriate given the nature of what we explored within VAX. Havos AI was responsible for three primary activities. First, we led the evidence synthesis process with a group of 14 researchers based throughout Africa in partnership with the Information Training and Outreach Center in Africa. Many of the findings that I want to go through today come directly from the evidence synthesis process. In addition, Havos, with partners, the Shamba Center for Food and Climate, held 3 focus group workshops with public and private sector partners across the African continent so that we could better understand the demand and preferences for the opportunity crops. In particular, we held one focus group workshop specifically on fonio, which is one of our opportunity crops. For this, we worked with partners at CIRAD, led by Michel Ganon, and our partners at the MIT Fact Alliance to better understand the needs, the market opportunities, and really possible futures for one of our opportunity crops. As you're undoubtedly getting a sense already, there is a lot of rich information, both in the research report as well as in the opportunity crops profiles. One of the things that I'd like to highlight is this figure 7, which is broken down crop by crop within the opportunity crops profile. And what this represents is the work of the evidence synthesis. So we can see the crops that we evaluated over here on the far left, and then take one of several pathways to better understand the interventions that have a strong evidence base supporting each one of these crops. So for instance, when we look at something like complementary feeding, we can better understand key facilitators that contribute to making complementary feeding, which is the supported opportunities for children to have healthy, nutritious food before the age of 5, but often before the age of 2, incorporated as part of their diets. In order to do that, we need to have awareness of children's taste preferences, as well as a number of other factors. I'm just going to stay on this one for now. Then when we trace this path, we're able to better understand what outcomes is it leading to: food security and nutrition, sustainable economic growth, resilience, inclusivity and women's empowerment, environmental health, and policy change. And finally, the concluding path, the conclusion of this path is better understanding the barriers to implementation. What is it that's keeping complementary feeding from having greater scaling up and uptake overall? One of the barriers to implementation is inconsistent access to affordable, nutritious food. And so that's really how to interpret those intervention pathways. But what I'd like to highlight just very briefly are sort of 3 key findings that emerged from the evidence synthesis. The first is that we need to work together to reach nutrition, climate, and food security targets. And ultimately, that's what this intervention pathway tells us. There is no single approach. There is no single intervention, organization, or pathway that will meet all the needs of an inclusive food system. We must work together, and we must look at the opportunities to couple interventions together in order for them to be the most successful. And this is true for any one of the opportunity crops. There is no silver bullet. The second key message is that unlocking advisory and extension services, which is the most common barrier facing farmers, will improve, not only will remove the barriers that so many farmers cite, which is limited extension capacity, but it will provide the opportunities that are needed to have updated knowledge and practices. Because ultimately, the opportunity crops will require scaling up process. And in order to have that scaling up process, the capacity issues where we frequently have 1,000 to 1 extension workers in any country must be addressed. And the final message here, the final key message that I'd like to give for this presentation, is that improving feedback channels for farmers and consumer data will help unlock better opportunities for the opportunity crops. So for instance, when we look very closely at trait priority studies, it highlights limitations in the original data capture, especially limited capture of sex disaggregated data. When we don't know the different preferences of the different communities, for scaling up opportunity crops. We miss the mark. We miss the mark of understanding how to create a demand-driven environment. And one of the best ways that we can create that demand-driven environment is to understand the needs and preferences and to create those feedback channels. So we see this when we look, no matter what we look at, if we're looking at crop breeding programs, or if we're looking at consumer preferences, the data capture must be improved. Colleagues. Oops. So colleagues, I'd like to just sum up finally and say thank you. And it is a delight to be part of the Vision for Adapted Crops and Soils, to be a part of the community of practice. And I'd like to say again, a big thank you to the 14 research reps from across Africa who joined us for the opportunity to translate research into action, as well as my partners at the Schomburg Center and others. Thank you. I hope the launch goes well.
Thank you very much to Jaron for being prepared actually to record herself while sitting in an airport so that we can at least hear what she has to say. Now we'll move on to our very symbolic launch of our reports. We are launching 2 reports today that you have heard about. The first one being the summary report on the opportunity crop profiles based on the presentation that you saw that Cynthia made. The other one is on the opportunity crop profiles, the additional information that is actually available. So these are the reports that we are launching. They are available online, and they are putting in the links to these reports right now. There are a number of questions that have come about how do we engage and what have you. As time progresses, there will be more information that will become available. And I think we will use the registration list from this launch to actually be giving you updates on what is coming up. And those that want to know how they might be able to engage will find information there. We can now move on to hearing something about research and implementation of VAX in Africa. As I indicated earlier, this has moved very fast from the first discussions in February 2023 to where we are now is really very fast. And so now we will hear first from Dr. Sarah Mbago Bunu, who is IFAD, sorry, I need to introduce her properly. She is IFAD's senior, she's IFAD's, don't have her. She is IFAD's, she's IFAD's, I think one of the regional representatives in Africa. Sarah, sorry, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself quickly before you give your remarks. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Namakolo. Good to see you again. Thank you very much. My name is actually Sarah Mbago Bunu, and I'm the Regional Director for IFAD for Eastern Southern Africa. Greetings to fellow distinguished panelists, some of who I have interacted very closely with, and participants. So I think this has really been very exciting. I think I do not want to overemphasize and build on Cynthia's presentation. The importance of scenarios around resilience is core to what IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, does and is doing. So that's really important going forward. And then, of course, the soil maps, the presentation we just had on that informs how we make investments. So that's also really very important, what Cameron has told us. We know from an Eastern Southern African perspective, IFAD has a very wide footprint. We are active in 17 countries. And we know that smallholder farmers, in the Eastern Southern African perspective, provide globally about 60 to 80% of the food. That said, unfortunately, they are in the face of climate change, working with very limited productive assets. And exacerbated by climate, as we have heard here, we cannot realistically continue to do the same and invest in the same way. And I think all the stakeholders here and Envoy Carrie Fowler, Dr. Fowler, was very clear in stating that this is a movement. It is for this reason that IFAD has developed its a multi-resilience program and a multi-donor trust fund in preparation to addressing some of the core issues that we see and we have just heard of right now. The opportunity crops present a wonderful opportunity to invest in new series of crops, reduce the vulnerability of depending on a few staples. And IFAD, as an assembler of development finance, we have already established the architecture to move to implementation. Just to give you a flavor of what we have already done under our 2 Resilience program, we launched this in 2021 with Enhanced Adaptation to Smallholder Agriculture program. And there we managed to mobilize 500 million. And we have actually been able to reach a total of 8 million vulnerable small-scale farmers across 43 countries who are impacted by climate change to build more resilient livelihoods. And it has also brought about 1 million hectares of land under climate resilient practices, which also mitigated 60 million tons of carbon dioxide. So I think IFAD is well placed to really move this dialogue, this data into implementation. In addition to this, IFAD is investing in nutrition-sensitive projects that are working to transform food systems to ensure that food systems are sustainable and resilient and produce nutritious, affordable, and accessible foods for rural populations who are then equipped with the knowledge and skills to ensure healthy diets for families and their communities. IFAD has made significant progress in mainstreaming nutrition across its investment portfolio. And to date in Eastern Southern Africa, for example, we have 35 nutrition-sensitive agricultural and rural development projects, newly designed and ongoing, who are improving and addressing the quality of diets for the benefit of rural populations. So all of this is just to say that we fully align with VAX's ambitions, and basically we envisage that we will have some intermediary goals that we are aiming towards, such as soil health improvement practices and climate resilient crop varieties adopted through this program. We also see that we can match land use with its long-term sustainable potential through some of the maps. We've been trying to translate that. We have increased investments in local plant breeding programs for nutritious climate resilient crops. And so these opportunity crops are some of the ones that we're targeting. We know that East Africa is really a basin for the production of pulses, beans. We've seen the cowpeas. We've seen what is resilient and not, also the root crops. So those are the ones we're trying to support in adoption. And we have enhanced knowledge systems for informed land use and management decisions. And of course, the all-important question from the last presentation is, how do we work with value chains? IFAD has developed very impactful systems of working in supporting SMEs, who are the backbone, small and medium enterprises who deliver inputs to communities. But not only that, they also offer essential off-farm services to ensure that food gets to growing urban centers. And so we invest along the value chain. We also work with multi-stakeholder platforms to ensure that farmer-producer groups are around the same table with private sector. And I think that's really important. We have guidelines and operational procedures to ensure the governance of those chains and to ensure that smallholder farmers really benefit from the value that is presented there. So what do we envisage under the VAX? We envisage that we hope by partnering in this we'll be able to expand training programs for plant breeders, local seed guardians and producers. The African Plant Breeding Academy, for who we have worked with, for instance, has successfully trained over 150 African plant breeders in cutting-edge plant breeding technology with specific focus on these opportunity crops. We will also be focusing and investing in seed systems. I think that was mentioned as one of the priority areas to enhance the supply of nutritious varieties of improved seed, strengthening local seed systems, and improving extension services. We have experience also across the Horn of doing this, improving extension, introducing digital, and supporting farmer-to-farmer management of plant genetic resources. We infuse dietary and nutrition messages there as well. We will also be investing in regenerating and restoring degraded landscapes and resuscitating protection of water catchments and improving groundwater and aquifer health in general, which is absolutely key for this region if you see what is happening in Southern Africa with the ongoing drought. And finally, technical assistance and knowledge systems to enable policymakers to make more informed decisions. As you said, as you've seen in those maps, it's not a one-fit end game. We have to be flexible, we have to engage, and that's what we do with stakeholders in each country and try to come up really with tailored solutions that benefit the dietary profiles in those countries, that really look at soil and regenerative capacities, that really look at the types of crops that will be more resilient. And this is all underpinned by our belief that adaptation finance that is reaching smallholder farmers in East and Southern Africa has been very limited. And we believe by bringing and acting and presenting development finance architecture that traces and reaches smallholder farmers at the last mile will enable all of you to come together with IFAD to realize the ambitions of this program. And I hope that will also stimulate and inform the way that we design in future financing cycles. As we get to 2030, this is absolutely critical that this agenda is scaled up and we were able to show early results and actually inform and provide the evidence to decision makers. I think Envoy Miyake really put it very closely. There is a whole, there was a summit on soil health and fertilizer use last year, 2023. And I think all African heads of state realize the importance of managing their natural assets in order to ensure food security. So with those few words, Namakola, I hand the floor back to you.
Yeah. So Sarah, I'm going to come back to you in about a minute because I noticed we don't actually have enough time to take the many questions that have come. But before I tell people how we're going to handle the questions that we don't have time to answer now, I want to leave you with a question which I will come back to you to address. A lot of the questions that are coming up are around how do people engage? How do individuals, how do institutions, research institutions, development institutions, how can you engage with the VACs? From the point of view of IFAD, if you can think about what people should keep their eyes on in terms of how they could perhaps find information on how they could engage as the situation evolves. I'll come back to you. And then to all participants, we don't have enough time. We've got almost 30 questions that we have collected in this session. So I have been busy discussing things behind the scenes with the colleagues in the VACS initiative. We will use all the questions that have been provided. They will be answered in a document that will be placed online. The website where the questions are going to be placed the answers will be placed is going to be put in the chat now. Kevin, if you can assist me with that. And so if you can come back to the website in a few days' time, we will have a document with the questions and the answers that the various members of the team the answers that they would have provided to those questions. And thank you very much for really a lot of interest that has been showed. I think the registration list for this webinar we will keep so that as the situation evolves, we'll use it to communicate developments as they emerge, including opportunities of involvement in the VAX initiative. Let me come back to you, Sarah, then to ask you to answer my challenge question to you.
Thank you, Namakola. And I think there's so much interest in the engagement, so that's really encouraging. As I mentioned, IFAD is an assembler of development finance. We have a lot of experience blending different types of finance. We are accredited by Jeff, accredited by the Green Climate Fund, accredited by GAFS. And so we are able to blend in specific financing in ongoing IFAD operations. And I think that agility and flexibility for us to blend in and merge additional resources is very important, not only in times of, it's also important for resilience in our times. And so what we will be doing in the context of VAX is basically designing additional financing for ongoing programs and new programs. Well, how do we do that? How do we design? We basically, at country level, evoke multi-stakeholder meetings and invite interested parties to come forward to share ideas. Of course, we would also be sharing templates and frameworks of how we will do this and kickstart a dialogue process in country. We probably will target the operations that are really looking at landscapes, looking at our nutrition sensitive projects, for instance, the 35 that are highlighted would be low hanging fruit. And then new designs that will be coming up will also be potential areas where we'll do these calls. We are organized, as I said, we have footprint of at least, we're at least 9-10 countries in Eastern Southern Africa. This will be led by country directors and country project coordinators. They're already on the ground. We have a footprint there, and they will call this together with the ministries of agriculture, for whom we work very closely, and other stakeholders, including project coordination teams and all the infrastructure we have in place. The idea is that these will be light processes, would look at opportunities to really inform the selection of these ideal priority crops, look at value chains and sort of co-select which ones will be most relevant, and then develop these proposals jointly. We usually have design teams that lead the process, but we will be sure that all stakeholders are consulted in this. And then in terms of implementing arrangements, we will then get to that stage once these additional financing proposals are being approved by our normal project approval cycles, which is an internal IFAD. IFAD holds 3 board meetings a year to discuss this and give feedback, enhance the quality of these proposals to ensure the principles of VAX are definitely infused in all of them. And we aim these processes. Usually, if we start a project from start to finish, it takes, we have a limit of 10 months, but additional financing is much shorter. So we hope to really be able to invite, even as I speak now, I think we are still finalizing the framework, and we hope that the stakeholders here will enable us to do that in the next 2 months, and then we'll be able to start the dialogue at country level. So maybe I can stop here. I gave a broad framework.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, Sarah. You've actually managed to answer multiple questions that were on the question list. I've also been informed now that we will also use the registration list to send the answers as well directly by email to all those in the webinar today. We move on to the closing part of our webinar, and it's a pleasure to invite Dr. Roy Steiner, Senior Vice President at the Food Initiative of the Rockefeller Foundation. We're very grateful with the funding that we have received from the Rockefeller Foundation for what we've done so far. Roy Steiner, over to you.
Thank you so much, Namakolo. You've done such a great job moderating this event. Well, as you know, the Rockefeller Foundation has been, involved with philanthropy for over 110 years. But with the climate crisis and the climate era that we're in, we have to reimagine what we need to do. We have an agricultural system that's just not meeting the needs of today, let alone tomorrow. And I think VAX is an example of the kind of initiative we need to have more of in the world. I mean, it is the principle of diversity. We have become too focused on a few crops. We also too input intensive. We need to become much more biologically and knowledge intensive agriculture. And that's going to require transformation. And so I'm very excited by these reports. It does show that we can produce nutritious food at scale that's from diverse sources. And that's going to, however, require quite a bit of transformation in almost everything that we're doing. So, we're committed to working with all of you to help make that happen. I do want to, I'd be remiss if I don't thank Carrie Fowler for bringing this bold vision to the world. Dr. Mayaki, the AU is so critical, and we really thank you for that. Minister Aguilera for your support. Italy, is the center of food in many places, in many ways, and has been an essential partner for us and for VAX. And then, of course, Havos AI, the AU, the U.S. State Department, FAO, the African Orphan and Crops Consortium. All of those institutions have been critical to moving this forward, and I really appreciate all that effort. This is just a starting point. There's so much to do. There's a lot of complexity to work out, but our marching orders are clear. We need to transform the food system that we've created. We designed the current one. We can design a better one. So with that, let me turn it back to you, Namakolo.
Thank you very much, Roy. I like the way we ended. Indeed, we can design a better one. So let's move on now to Dr. Lindiwe Sibanda, who is the Systems Board Chair for the CGIAR, a collective of 15 international agriculture research institutes. Over to you, Lindiwe.
Thank you very much, Namakolo. I'll be quick. Colleagues, members of the movement, VAX movement, I'm speaking to you from Zimbabwe. It's March. We today are at 35 degrees Celsius. We've gone 6 weeks without rains. And you can imagine at the peak of our cropping season, what that means. We planted not in November, which is our traditional planting date, but in December, because the rains came early in November, stopped, and then resumed in December. But if you look at my crop now, everything is gone except the traditional crop that I ventured into for the first time, millet. So VAX could not have come at a better time than now. For us at CGIAR, the fit with VAX is perfect. We are on a journey where as CGIAR, we've committed ourselves to a mission to deliver science and innovation that advances transformation of food systems, land systems, and water systems in the face of climate change. We developed this strategy in 2015, and VAX provides a perfect platform for us to operationalize our mission. We are going to be judged through 5 impact areas: nutrition, health and food security, number 1, poverty reduction, livelihoods and job creation, number 2, 3, gender equality, youth and social inclusion, number 3, number 4, climate adaptation and mitigation, Number 5, environmental health and biodiversity. We are so excited at CGIAR because VAX speaks to all our 5 impact areas. It speaks also to our main mission of transforming the food systems, the water systems, and the land systems in the face of climate change. We're excited to be part of the VAX movement, but more important, we believe the time is now. We are at a very dangerous moment where, as Roy has said, if we don't act now, we will be in a disastrous situation. So would like to thank Kerry, who hates to be thanked, but he planted the seed. And as a good farmer, we know he will take us to a harvest opportunity that will leave us better off. We thank all our partners who are funding this initiative. We also thank the Italian government that has come in together with other governments that are supporting. Most important, the African Union, our home for us as Africans. We are happy that VAX is aligned, but most important that VAX is looking into changing consumption and nutrition behavior so that Africa is the biggest market for our produce. But most important, building the capacity for the future. So thank you, VAX. Thank you to everybody who has joined this movement. Together, we cannot fail. Thank you. Over to you, Namokolo.
Thank you very much, Lindiwe. Indeed, a lot of thanks to go all around. And now finally, for our final closing remarks to our Special Envoy for the African Union on Food Systems. Over to you, Dr. Mayaki. Can somebody advise me if Dr. Mayaki is still with us? Okay,
He's on.
it looks he's on.
He still appears there, but maybe he's lost connectivity.
Okay, perhaps he has lost connectivity, so we are grateful to his presence here as Special Envoy on Food Systems for the African Union. I just reiterate also, thank you to all the participants. Special thanks to Special Envoy Kari Fowler, Special Envoy Mayaki as well. Special thank you to the Rockefeller Foundation through Roy Steiner. Special thanks to all the scientists and the hard work that you have done so far, including the AGMIC team, the Columbia University team, the nutrition group at FAO. If I have forgotten anybody, forgive me, and I am still thankful. And thank you, everybody. Please look out in your emails to receive an email with the answers to all the questions that we have not been able to respond to. And perhaps if we have further information to share with you, we will also use this list to do the same. So thank you very much, and goodbye to all. And may we all move forward strongly with our VAX vision. Thank you.